What's up guys, James here, how are you doing? So this is going to be a video response to Integralmath regarding abortion. He's done 2 videos on the topic recently. I'm not sure which one I'll attach this to yet, but I will leave links to both his videos down in the description box. Most of this video will be me addressing Integralmath directly, but I do have a few other things I'd like to go over as well. So as most of my subscribers know, I'm very much pro-choice up until a certain cut-off date, and I'll be getting into exactly why that is later in this video. Now, the other thing I'd like to be going over in this video is some of the pretty poor arguments which come from the pro-choice side. Now, as I said, I'm very much pro-choice myself, but as far as I'm concerned, a bad argument is a bad argument no matter who's presenting it. And if we don't address the bullshit which comes from our own side of debates, then that's going to reflect badly on us. So we do have a bit of a duty for a form of quality control, if you will. Now, both me and Integralmath both seem to hold this viewpoint, and as such, we do seem to be labelled as arseholes and douchebags on quite a regular basis. Now, okay, so I'll start off with addressing Integralmath. Now, I think that the analogy you gave is pretty poor. So for the benefit of the people who are too lazy to go and check Integralmath's original video, I'd just like to go over his arguments pretty quickly, and if I get anything wrong, please feel free to either leave me a video response or correct me in the comment section, and I shall respond as appropriate. Now, his main arguments are that there's times when people's rights conflict with each other, that bodily autonomy is basically an absolute right, and it should trump all others in regards to abortion. He says that a child has the right to be brought up, but you cannot force a person to take that role. So, for example, a child can be put into foster care, they can be adopted, they can be looked at by the grandparents. It doesn't really matter so long as that child is in fact being brought up, but you cannot force a person to take that role. Now, he gives the analogy of organ donation. Now, no matter how badly a person needs an organ, if they need a kidney, you cannot force another person to take the role of donor, even if the risk of death is extremely low, and even if there was no risk whatsoever to that person, you cannot take the organ off of that person against their will and put it in another person. The reason I see that argument failing is that it's not a valid comparison. The comparison to forcing somebody to give an organ against their will in regards to pregnancy would be forcing a woman down, tying her up, and artificially inseminating her against her will. And I don't think there's many people who would argue that that should be allowed under any circumstance. But if you want to compare it to abortion, the person, the analogy would be the person already has the organ; they're already living with it. Whether the organ's already been taken against you, against your will, or maybe you decided to do it voluntarily and you just want it back. You want to take back your internal organ and have your body all to yourself. So what you do is you go out and you slash the person open, rip the organ out, and then have it put back inside you, and there's a 100% chance that the other person will die in the process. Now, that would be classified as murder, and so it's not a very fair. So using organ donation is not a very fair comparison. The organ is already being used by the other person, and to take it back would result in a 100% chance of death for the other person. So in the comment section, I asked whether or not you supported late-term abortion, and you said yes. Now maybe I wasn't completely clear by what I meant for late-term abortion, but yeah, the logical consequence of your argument that a woman should have absolute, complete, 100% bodily autonomy, then she should be able, 1 second away from giving birth, to grab a massive knife and stab it up inside her and kill the developing organism. And although that might seem really mental and crazy, if your argument is valid, she should have the absolute 100% right to do that. And that I do strongly disagree with, because at that stage of development, I do think that the thing developing inside her is developed enough to classify as being worthy of being sufficiently human to deserve the human right to life. Though that is the only factor which I think matters in this debate. Does the thing growing inside the woman have sufficient development to be sufficiently human to be deserving of the right to life? Nothing else matters. They may be interesting talking points, they may stimulate some discussion, but they are irrelevant. If the organism is human enough, then it doesn't matter how much you think a woman has the right to choose, she doesn't have the right to commit murder. If the organism isn't sufficiently human, then it really doesn't fucking matter how irresponsible the pro-lifers think she's being. She should have the absolute right to do whatever the hell she wants with her own body. Pro-lifers love to bring up how so many weeks the fetus has fingers, and at this number of weeks it has a heartbeat, and blah blah blah, all of that crap. And that is completely irrelevant. What makes something deserving of the human rights is the neurological development, the fact that it will have self-awareness, and it will have the capacity for suffering, which a human being does. You could grow a 2-foot testicle in a lab and punch the crap out of it, and it wouldn't feel pain because it doesn't have self-awareness. It's not aware of the pain. Even if there's a microchip which responds to the nerve impulses which are given when you punch it, that still doesn't feel pain because it's not aware of the pain. I could build a robot for £100 which avoids loud noises, and when it's impacted, it moves away from that impact, and that would be a basic level of danger avoidance programmed into it, but it wouldn't be self-aware, and so it wouldn't really feel pain. It's just a fucking robot. So yeah, it's the brain which determines which I think makes something worthy of having human rights. You could put a human brain in a robot, and killing it would then be murder. Whereas if you had a robot brain in a human body, that wouldn't be murder. You're basically killing something which has the mind of a robot. So yeah, that's where the difference is. So going back to the organ donation thing which you brought up, and I think that this is comparable to abortion in this respect, if someone took my kidney and put it in a mouse, I should be able to kill that mouse in order to get my kidney back. And that wouldn't be murder because the mouse isn't sufficiently developed to classify as being human. I'm sure there is a debate which can be had about when exactly the thing is developed enough to be able to be classified as human in this respect. And really, I don't think that there is a line in the sand. You can't we need a line in the sand there, but where we choose it to be would be completely arbitrary, because in nature there are no fine dividing lines. If we want to talk about different species, I would consider a Neanderthal to be sufficiently human to be worthy of human rights. The same with Homo erectus. But if we went back to, say, an Australopithecus, then I personally, I would say that isn't sufficiently human. Other people may disagree with me there, but when it comes to abortion, certainly without a shadow of a doubt, anything under 15 weeks is not comparable to a person whatsoever. If you're going up to 30 odd weeks, then yeah, I'd say that it is sufficiently human. So there is a debate there, and I'm not an embryologist, so I'm not going to be able to say where I think the exact line should be, but I do think that doesn't ruin my argument that at some point it's not sufficiently human, and at another point it will be sufficiently human enough to count. Now, the rest of this video isn't going to concern anything which Integralmath has said whatsoever, but I'm going to go over some of the other pro-choice arguments which I think are pretty poor, and I'm probably going to be taken out of context because people are dicks. But as I said earlier, I am pro-choice myself. I just think that there's a lot of poor arguments which are presented from my side of the debate as well. So, firstly, the argument that pro-lifers are just misogynists. And yeah, while there may be a correlation between someone being pro-life and being a misogynist, the two are not necessarily intrinsically linked. If someone believes that a small cluster of cells is a human being, and that it's worthy of human rights, then it's not misogynistic to be against abortion, because in their eyes it's murder. It's not coming from a position of misogyny, it's coming from a position of being fucking retarded. Next argument I want to deal with is people who say, well, you don't have a right to say anything because you're a man. This is basically just an ad hominem. I can't, you know what I'm trying to say. I can't really speak at the moment. But yeah, it's just a personal attack. It's just shut up because I'm going to attack your character rather than the arguments which are being presented. They'll just say, well, they're a man, they're being misogynistic, shut up. Of course, if it's a woman who's making the same arguments, then the same people will say that they're simply brainwashed into believing that. So it doesn't matter who's making the pro-life arguments, they are wrong simply on account of their gender or biological sex. I'm an intactivist. I think that genital mutilation of all children is wrong, regardless of their gender. But if there's someone who supports the idea of circumcision on males, I'm not going to say, well, you have no right to comment because you don't have a penis, because that's fucking stupid. It's just going to get them defensive, they're going to think that I'm an idiot, and they're going to be even more strong in their belief because of it. So I deal with the arguments that they're actually presenting. I've also heard many pro-choice people simply assume that the pro-lifer must be a Christian or a Muslim or some form of theist, and basically criticise them on that before hearing what their view is. Now, yeah, there certainly are a lot of people whose pro-life outlook comes from their religious views, but there are also atheist pro-lifers as well. The puppy turtle seems to think that if he was an atheist, he'd still be pro-life. The ignored gender is also pro-life, and he's an atheist. So that it doesn't necessarily come from any religious views. The final argument I'd like to deal with is the pro-choice argument that the cut-off date for abortion should be when the organism is capable of surviving on its own. Now, I disagree with this. for a few reasons. As I said earlier, I think that it should be to do with mental development. So after all, it's the brain which makes someone a human being in respect to being self-aware, having emotions, being capable of suffering, etc. Not whether or not they can survive without the help of somebody else's internal organs. Uh, but even if and the problem with having it so when the organism is capable of surviving on its own is that that date will change over time. So 100 years ago, a 2-month premature baby would have almost certainly died. However, when I was born, I managed to survive quite comfortably. As technology gets better, we'll be able to reduce that time further and further, and eventually we may be able to have a 1-week-old fetus removed from the mother, put in some fucking solution or some artificial womb or something, and have the organism survive. So really, saying that that's the date when the thing becomes human, you're arguing that in 50 years' time, you'll be arguing that a 1-week-old fetus is a human being. So, major flaw with with saying that as the cutoff date. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.